Okay, so let's call this meeting to order. Any pecuniary interests that people need to disclose? Nope. Has everyone read the past minute? Yeah. Do I have a motion to adopt those? See, Anna, seconded by Mike Jorna. And I think by now we've all met either in real life or virtually. Rebecca Garlick, who is, what is your official title? The
Climate change coordinator.
Climate change coordinator, thank you. And so some of you may have seen after the last council meeting that they postponed or deferred setting targets for their climate action plan. In favor of having more of a report from Rebecca, and also mentioned getting feedback from staff and also this committee. So I thought it was pertinent to have Rebecca come and speak to us sooner than later. And there's the other Mike. Welcome.
Hello.
So Rebecca, I'm going to pass it over to you so you can give us an update on where things are at. And welcome to the committee.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, so I guess I've just been kind of reviewing what it would look like for Stratford to, like how much we would have to reduce per sector kind of thing. So looking at Stratford specific emissions, if we were doing the 10% reduction as was initially proposed, the 10% was pretty much just to look at what is feasible for all of the municipalities, but we can always tailor it to individual priorities in the municipalities. Just to get an idea of what the 10% could look like though. So for retrofits, for example, they usually give about a 40% increase in efficiency for homes in these retrofits. So for example, looking at like a 20% participation rate that in Stratford, that would be about just under 3,000 homes that we would have to retrofit in the next 9 years. But that would only reduce our emissions by about 3,000, sorry. So we would still have to obviously reduce a lot more. Looking at it as well, if we removed on top of that, if we removed vehicles off of the road, that would have to be about like 5,300 cars in total. So about 670 cars per year on top of that. That's just to remove them. So that's not transitioning to electric vehicles. If we looked at vehicles, sorry, just let me pull up some of my data here. So if we're looking at converting vehicles in Stratford to electric, for example, so I did a range between 5% conversion to 20% conversion. So if we did a 5% conversion, that would only reduce about 5,000 tons. A 20% conversion would be about 20,600 tons. That would be replacing about 4,400 vehicles to electric in the next 9 years. So about just under 500 per year we would have to transition in Stratford to reach that. And that 20,000, looking at the 10% reduction would be almost the 10%. So in order for us to get there, we would have to be willing to, obviously invest heavily in the electric grid in Stratford and look at how that would kind of impact local taxes too, I know, unfortunately. Yeah, that's kind of where I've been looking to see. I was curious what you thought would be realistic if you think that per year, for example, like do you think your neighbors would be willing to retrofit their homes? I think we would need to get the 30% reduction. we would need about 8,000 homes retrofitted in the next 8 years. So I'm not sure if that's necessarily realistic at the moment. It may be. There could be really cool things happening over the next few years. And I know there's going to be a lot of funding coming forward from the federal government too. So it could be for sure. But yeah, the 20% would be about a 20% participation rate would be about 2,700 homes. But again, that's only about 11% of the 10% reduction target. So very minimal, but still a lot of homes that we would have to retrofit.
I'm seeing all sorts of hands being raised with questions. So we'll go to Anita and then Jody and then Bonnie.
My question is, how many homes are in Stratford? Like, the population is over 30,000.
Mm-hmm.
How many homes are there? That's quite a big chunk of the number of homes in Stratford.
Yes. Where was that? There's in 2016 in the census, it says there's about 13,000 dwellings, 13,600 dwellings in total.
So Jody, you're up.
Okay, sorry, you want me to go ahead? So a couple things. One is, can we just so we're all on the same numbers page. There's a lot of numbers. So can you remind us what the emissions rate that we're looking at right now in tons? So the 2017 number that we're working from. Can you remind us?
Yeah, absolutely. The current emissions for the 2017 baseline year were 277,156.55 tons.
Okay, and then so 10% of that is pretty obvious, is 27,000.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. And the other piece of it is, so we're looking, you were talking about different projects and how, if we had 20% of people retrofit their homes, we could achieve the entire 10% goal. So
no, not the entire 10% goal.
Yeah. So it just is a little confusing. So like there are different, obviously we're going to try a bunch of different things. There's going to be different approaches, and there's going to be reductions coming from different places that would come together to make whatever the target goal is, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, because that can be a little confusing. Yeah, like if we could maybe look at it in, so if we're looking at, 20% of houses being retrofitted would be, 2% out of that 10, or 4% out of the 10, or whatever.
Yeah, it's about 3,000 tons. 20% of your households were retrofitted on average.
I'm curious too, do we have the numbers? And maybe it's Kate that has to answer this question. I wonder if we have the numbers yet from for instance, the green bin program and some of the other initiatives that we take, because that will already have gotten us a little bit down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would have to ask Kate if she has the numbers for 2020 to see how it's made a difference. Obviously, it's going to be a gradual reduction because there's still green bin stuff in the landfill that's breaking down, releasing methane. So it'll take a little bit of time, but I can definitely see it's going to significantly help.
Okay, thanks. That's all the questions I had for now.
Okay, so then I have Bonnie, then Mike Sullivan.
Hi, Rebecca. According to your report, can you give us what are the emissions per sector and percentage? Transportation was the biggest one, correct?
Yes. So the commercial and institutional buildings are about 13%. Residential is 16%. Manufacturing and industry buildings are 18%. On-road transportation is 39%. Solid waste is 14%.
Okay, because when I look at those numbers, shouldn't we be concentrating on the highest sector, try to get that down? Because if you're going to do programs in residential, that's not doing anything. 60% of emissions, you said, were residential.
Mhm.
39 is transport related vehicles. That's where the problem is, correct?
For sure, yeah, it's definitely the biggest contributor, but at the end of the day, we have to look at everything holistically. Not every single person can get rid of their vehicle or transition to electric. They may not have the infrastructure at their home. So then we would have to look at the retrofitting and how we could encourage residents to transition to electric vehicles, that kind of thing.
And what would be low hanging fruit in the transportation sector if it's not electric?
I would definitely say focusing on the active transportation, so moving people away from using their personal vehicles and choosing alternative low emission options. So whether that is taking your bike or riding the bus, that kind of thing would definitely be the low hanging fruit.
And our active transportation or public transportation is not there yet. There's new, intra or inter-community transportation now, but
Mm-hmm.
that can obviously be increased, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. I just think that's a massive sector. And, when we're looking at resources, should a lot of work be in that sector? Residential is feel good because you can get programs to do that, but are you going to hit those targets when you look at the numbers? When there's a sector that's almost 40%.
Absolutely, yeah, I would agree.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
I just want to chime in. It's true. It makes sense to focus on where the largest amount of emissions are happening. But also the residential is, like Rebecca said, kind of can be easier for some people to do, and also impacts their pocketbook. Like if you start installing energy efficiencies, you see a reduction in your bills. And so there may be more impetus to make changes there. Anyways, okay, so Bonnie and then Mike Sullivan, please.
So if you wanted to get a base of how many houses are in Stratford, you should be able to contact the tax department and they can tell you exactly how many homes there are. So my second part of that is the new homes that are being built, I'm assuming they're not all being built to energy efficient, right? So would they all have to be retrofitted? So a big education part that we should be really concentrating on is maybe contacting Saba or whatever and talking to them about the importance of building energy efficient homes, and then trying to get some kind of policy in where they have to have a certain percentage of the homes built to a LEED standard, right? Like we did a LEED standard at the Rotary Complex, but we didn't pay the $60,000 for the fee. We just did it. And same as the Dufferin Arena, we put a green roof on there and capturing the gray, capturing the water, but we didn't apply for any funding or anything. Now, another thing I wanted to know is, in the residential homes, when we're talking about retrofitting, are apartments included in that?
They wouldn't be included in that portion because it obviously is difficult to upgrade an apartment building at this point, and there aren't too many funding programs directed towards that. There may be some coming, but as of right now, they mainly focus on detached or semi or townhouse kind of homes.
So many years ago, probably 20 now, First County Greenworks worked with Green Canada. And I mean, Reef still does it in Waterloo, but, and we went out and we did inter-guide visits. I think it was over 800 homes, and they all got a kit so they could switch over their shower heads, their taps, and, put insulation around their pipes and put insulation like where your lights switches are, which I never even thought of. You put insulation behind your little thing so that it stops the air from coming in and stuff like that. But when we're talking retrofitting homes, we're not talking that, are we? We're talking about changing your windows, insulating, big projects, right? Like I'm assuming in this day and age, most people now, I would imagine there's very few, especially since Festival Hydro also offered that program, that would still have old shower heads and not have the water on their taps or switching over to LED lights. I mean, obviously it's going to be, you have to, because they're not going to be selling the old bulbs anymore, right? But we're talking, when you're talking the big grants, like not grants, big projects, like having somebody come out and do like an inner guide visit on your home and seeing what you need. Because I know a lot of times people think, oh, replace my windows, a thing you need to do. And maybe all you need to do is caulk or put in insulation. You don't need to change your windows or doors or whatever, right? Is that what we're basically talking about?
Yes, yeah, it would be more comprehensive, deep retrofits rather than just the quick, simple kind of fixes.
And if we're gonna, like we talk about the biggest hit is transportation. So the electric car is the way to go. Well, for one, I've just bought a brand new car 3 years ago, and I'm expecting it to last me 15 years, so I probably won't need another car, right? But what's the next best solution for people if they can't, say, afford an electric car, or educating people about how if they do more oil changes and keep their tires inflated and things like that, how that also helps, and how, changing our anti-idling bylaw. I think I sent a recommendation off for that, and I see staff's going to look at that anyway, and lowering that, and actually maybe start ticketing people that are actually, I don't believe we've ever, since 2001, ticketed one person for idling. I've never heard of it, so, and I did ask several times, but not in the last couple of years, I haven't. I'm sure, and I'm assuming because, the police have a lot more important things they need to be working on, right? But I mean, our bylaw officers could or whatever. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out ways that we could look at the biggest crunches where we can get the biggest bang, like electric cars. We see Ford and different ones are now going to be switching over, but that's going to take 3 or 4 years, right? And then people want to start buying them. And once they start doing that, those are going to come down in prices, just like the Tesla has, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that we could be looking at, educating people about, how you can lower that? And then if they do that, how do we track that? How do we know that that's happened? Like, how do we know? Like, I went out today and got the guy to come in and do an inner guide visit, and I had my insulation updated. So I've lowered my greenhouse gases by a lot, right? But how do you know I did that? How do you know I went out and bought an electric car? How are we going to know that so that we can reduce our greenhouse gases? Okay, that's enough for now.
Those are all really great questions and points. It's definitely difficult to keep track of like the individual vehicles. So you definitely have to get that information from the MTO. Maybe they would be willing to provide that specific. I know they keep track of who buy, like the number of electric vehicles. It just takes a long time. I'm still waiting to get that information. It's been a few months, so it takes time, unfortunately. As for the retrofitting of the homes, you would see it in the overall consumption of electricity and natural gas. So you would get that information from Festival or from Enbridge. They would have that. So you could see gradually that decrease the more people that retrofit their homes.
Okay, over to you, Mike.
Thanks. Can you hear me, everybody? Okay. Rebecca, your numbers are basically 47% of our emissions come from buildings, 39% from transport, and 14% from solid waste. Is there anything we've missed? Is there like industrial processes that emit gases that we haven't included in that, or is that everything Stratford emits?
So the industry processes and like your commercial kind of emissions that come from the business practices wouldn't be included in this. They're scope 3 emissions is what it's called. So that wouldn't be included in this emission count, that would be included in the individual business emissions. So they would be required to report that to the national inventory. So that wouldn't be included in community emissions, is basically what I'm seeing.
Okay, so and your suggestion about the number of homes that we would have to retrofit or the number of cars we'd have to take off the road are based on either the 10% or the 30% or whatever percent. But they're not mutually exclusive. You can be doing both. You can be doing all three at the same time. I guess what I'm beginning to realize is we only have 29 years left. And one of the, so replacing cars with electric cars means that people shouldn't buy another gasoline engine car, period, end of story. No matter how much the difference in price is, we in Stratford should be encouraging people to just buy them. I just bought a fully electric vehicle. I went from a Volt, which was a partly electric vehicle, and it's still sitting at the dealer's lot. And 4 months later, nobody's bought it. The used vehicle is an electric vehicle that anybody could use, would be around $15,000 to buy. The dealers are not pushing it. And I don't know how you encourage dealers the way they are in Quebec. That's one thing. So I think, and people have this notion that you need special infrastructure in your house to have an electric car. That's just not true. I plug mine into 110 volts every night. And as long as I don't take the car down to zero, but I'm just driving around the community, or even, as far as the 401 and back, I can charge it overnight without any difficulty. And there are enough high-speed charging places in Stratford that if I do need to fill it further, I can do that. So to hint anyway that one of the holdbacks is the notion that I'm going to need special equipment in my house isn't true anymore, given that Stratford has some high-speed infrastructure. It's not free, and it's more expensive than plugging it into your house, but the number of times that I would ever need that in the 4 months that I've owned the car would probably be 3 times that I would need to charge it somewhere other than my house. So that's the transport side. On the building side, in each of the 13,600 dwellings, plus I don't know how many, there's about 17,000 addresses of institutional and residential and manufacturing addresses. Every one of those in the next 29 years is going to change their furnace at least once. And if we don't start today telling people to change their furnace into a energy or an emissions-free furnace, meaning electric, then we've lost. Because if next year somebody changes their furnace and just leaves it as gas or oil, I don't think there are too many oils in Stratford, but if they just leave it as a fossil fuel, that particular property has got another 30 years of life, and we can't afford to wait. And so the 10% goal is affording to wait, is suggesting that we should just wait. If we divide all 13,600 dwellings into 4%, like for 25 years, let's say that the life of a furnace is 25 years. So for the next 25 years, 4% will come up for renewal. So that we're looking at 4% a year of those dwellings over the next 10 years. Maybe only 3 because you got 30 years, but let's 3 or 4% a year for the next 10 years. That's 40% of the dwellings. That's a lot, but it's what we have to do. I don't know why anybody would suggest that we can somehow do this in dribs and drabs. We can't, because we will be punishing people for continuing to invest in fossil fuel infrastructure in their homes when 15 years from now we say, nope, sorry, I know you just bought a new one, but you got to change it, and you're going to have to pay for it. And so what would you recommend? put you in the hot seat as a way to convince council and in turn the people that moving to heat pumps or either air source because they're available or ground source, as was suggested at a previous meeting, that we start building the infrastructure under the roads, is not only possible, but absolutely necessary if we're to meet the target of 2050. And so if we have to find a way to retrofit, so whatever, 10, even if it's only 10% between now and 2030, but let's say 15% between now and 2030, that's 2,000 homes. And those 2,000 homes have got to switch their fuel system. Now, most of those homes will be doing it anyway, because we're picking the ones with the oldest furnaces. And so would you know what the difference in cost would be between a heat pump, an electric heat pump, and a gas furnace on a replacement basis? Let's just say that's all we're going to do. And if there is a difference, that it's significant, is that not something the city should be looking at? Looking at providing the incentive. Maybe it's through an interest-free loan that only comes due when you sell the house. That's how other municipalities have done this kind of thing in the past. But do you know what the difference is? Do you have any figures along that line?
I don't have the exact numbers at the moment, but I can definitely find them and send them off to the committee and give you that information. I definitely recommend in the plan developing like a green building standard and developing those deep retrofit programs as well. Because yeah, as you said, some people may feel it's cost prohibitive for them to move towards or move away from your typical gas furnace. But if there's these programs in place to help support that through, if it's an LIC program, then it definitely makes it more feasible for more residents. So those are definitely recommendations that I've provided, but I'll definitely get the cost difference between the two.
Okay, my final question is that the report that went to City Council at the last City Council meeting suggested that you were in agreement with the 10% target. And I'm hoping you're not in agreement that 10% is enough, but are you in agreement with me that it needs to be significantly greater than 10%?
I mean, as a climate change worker, I would love to see an ambitious target. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I will pass it to the other Mike, and then Anna, and then Emily.
Thank you, Emily. First comment on what Bonnie was talking about, which is maybe we should be insisting that all new buildings meet much better standards, or actually you said a percentage should be forced that way onto the developers and the builders. Well, I agree if that percentage is 100%. And the reason for that is that anybody who buys into a brand new constructed home is not about to be talked into a retrofit within the near future. And I think it's up to the community itself to set standards for what they're aiming for. The second thing is that I strongly believe that in retrofitting, the most important single issue is the prevention of heat loss through the envelope of the buildings. Because if you don't have the most energy efficient furnace right now, or for that matter, the most energy efficient light bulbs or the energy efficient anything, they all produce their waste in the form of excess heat, which stays inside the building. If the heat loss in the envelope is looked after sufficiently. So I think the important thing in retrofitting is insulation, air infiltration, and also good windows. And my final of three comments would be, and this is for the committee, but maybe mostly for Jody and Bonnie. And that is that if we're serious about this is going to happen, when is the city of Stratford going to make a big fuss about the fact that all their staff vehicles are going to be purchased to be electric only? Because none of them leave town. All of them get garaged every night or after every shift and could be recharged. And I think that if the city were to set that example, it would make the selling of the concept to the larger community a lot easier. And I guess I'll sit back and listen for a while now.
Thanks, Mike. Anna?
Thank you. Hi, Rebecca. Thank you very much. Well, just a question. When do you think you're going to be able to present the report to council? Originally, it was thought to be next month. Is it now going to be a bit later, do you think?
I'm not too certain at this point. I have a meeting with everybody, like all of my committee members, so all of the CAOs, and Chris will be there as well tomorrow. So by then we'll decide when that's going to go to council.
Thank you. Am I wrong in thinking that the results of this study indicated that the residents of Stratford were largely in support of a higher target? With the 900 respondents, that you had people were quite ambitious in the targets that they recommended?
Yeah, so out of
10%?
all the responses from across the county, the results showed that the respondents were supportive of about a 30% reduction target.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing is, as Mike said, between those three categories of emissions of commercial, residential, and manufacturing, it's 47%. And of that, commercial and manufacturing is 31%. And when we talk about retrofit, we talk about residential, but what can we do to encourage retrofit and rethink in the other two sectors? Are there things afoot to bring retrofitting to those sectors as well?
So at the moment, those sectors are a little bit more challenging to address. I know the federal government does have regular kind of assistance for industrial and manufacturing facilities to reduce their emissions. Obviously, it's voluntary. And then for commercial, there are programs like similar to how we have with residential with a PACE program. You can do a CPACE program. It can be costly and risky, but there may be more funding opportunities that come up to address this, because the federal government, they realize that buildings across Canada are realistically one of the largest contributors to our emissions. So there's going to hopefully be a lot more funding opportunities and support for commercial and industrial buildings. But as of right now, there isn't really much available, unfortunately. So yeah,
we need to do something on that front. And ultimately, I guess what we're saying is we have to get off natural gas. I mean, when would that happen, do you think, that we would, I mean?
That is a great question. We can hope very soon, but I think that that'll take a lot of investment, particularly if you want Stratford to be off of natural gas. That would take a lot of investment in infrastructure. And then looking at other maybe sources like biogas sources that you could use instead of natural gas. But again, it can be expensive and time consuming, but those are at least a little bit more realistic in the time frame of like the next 10 years, I would say, transitioning more to a biogas source rather than being fully electric, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
And just, Mike, when you asked about cost, you know, that program about the community in Nova Scotia where the banks were loaning people money to help them purchase heat pumps. The figure that he quoted for a small home was 16,000. Was the loan that he got from the bank for his heat pump installation. I don't know how big the house was, but he said it was a small to medium sized house. And I guess a natural gas furnace is somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000. A new one. We're having to get a new furnace in the next year, and I've just been looking at the cost. So it seems it's 3 times as much, I guess, more or less for a heat pump. Anyway, okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, over to Emily.
Hi, Rebecca. Hi, everyone. I have a 2-part question. The first one is the tractor trailers and transportation included in the industrial and solid waste numbers, or does that move over into the transportation category?
So I wasn't able to collect that data because Stratford doesn't collect that, and because of the size of Stratford, that data isn't externally collected from the organization that most other municipalities or larger municipalities have access to get that information. So that's data that we would have to get from the specific industries to understand what their fuel usage is.
Sure. So in terms of the green bin program, I understand how we're reducing our emissions because instead of off-gassing in the landfill, they're now going somewhere, but there are also now more trucks on the road driving to London. So those numbers haven't been worked out about how much we're putting out by driving them to London and how much we would potentially save if we brought the green bin program to Stratford instead of hauling it all the way to London.
Yeah, I don't have the exact difference, but it would obviously definitely reduce emissions quite substantially if the green bin stuff was kept in Stratford versus driving it down to London for sure.
Okay, I saw Jody raise her hand. Did you raise your hand too, Bonnie? Okay, so we'll go Jody, then Bonnie.
Yeah, a few things. One, the green bin program, when we instituted it last year, one of the reasons we were thinking was that we do have a renewable natural gas project that is underway, in the planning stages. So the idea was that we would start the program and then it would end up going to the Stratford site rather than externally. The other thing that we wanted to make sure, and I don't know if it's 100% happened, is that the trucks are actually a dual truck. So it will pick up the garbage in-town trucks. But there was additional trucks obviously going out. So that was one thing. Another piece of that, so you said in your report, this is the report that's coming, I'm assuming there's something about a green building standard. Is there something that you can point to? I'm looking at, I found another community, Whitby has something called the Green Development Plan. So they've recently put together, a municipal plan with tiers. Yeah, have you seen that? And I'm wondering if there's some way that we could recommend, as we're putting our plan forward, something like that, something that would have green building standards, and maybe we could beef it up a little, but I'm wondering if you'd seen the Whitby one and what you thought of it.
I haven't looked specifically at the Whitby one, but I had looked at a few different ones. There's also one, I think it's like West Willenbury or something like that. They also have one that's like tiered, and it's also in a more rural community too. So kind of a similar dynamic. So there's a lot of really great green building standards out there right now. And there's a lot of funding too to go towards actually developing your own. The Clean Air Partnership also developed a tool to help municipalities develop their own green building standard. that'll also be in the plan. So you'll get to read that through in the coming weeks. But yeah,
Is the funding for that through FCM, or do you?
I believe so. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, over to Bonnie.
Yes, just to respond to Mike Jorna's questions. The electric buses, my understanding is we got a grant for 5 years in doing buses, but in 2023, the goal is to start switching them then. I think we're going to get permission that we can change the grant. We couldn't in the first 2 years. I think that's how it's working. And then that would mean we'd have to get all the infrastructure in, like the charging stations, and slowly start switching the buses. And to dealing with the trucks and that, staff's been watching that, and when they become more available, then we're going to start switching them. Apparently there isn't a lot of electric vehicles in the range of trucks and stuff that they're buying, but over the next 3 to 5 years, we'll probably see more of that, and then they're going to start switching. And I think that was in the report that came to council too, that they were talking about that. One of the things I was wondering about after Anna was stating about a furnace, because we just put a new one in, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago now. And a furnace versus the heat pump type. And the heat pump type, is that more like the geothermal furnace? Is that what you mean? And I'm wondering, so, it costs like 3 times the amount, but what is the difference in the savings afterwards? Like what you're paying out? Do we know that? Like say I'm paying, I don't know, $50 a month for gas and $100 for my hydro. What's the difference after if I went with the heat pipe type thing? That might also be a big help, because when you save monthly, makes a big difference. And it also makes a big difference is when you are buying a brand new home, it's like your mortgage, you're paying it off over the next 10 to 15 years, where I'm later in life that, well, hopefully I'd live long enough to get a payback on it, but who knows, when you're over 70, you never know what's going to happen, right? I remember Eric Huberhart saying there was an older gentleman on Home Street put on solar panels, and he goes, not worth his while, he's in his 80s, which sort of made you think about it, right? But because it's a very small payback on a solar panel type thing. But it's great. Like what they say, like in Europe, is that it's just people are, when they're buying a house and mortgaging it, they make it energy efficient at the same time when they're borrowing their mortgage money, because it pays off over the time. When they get older, they hardly have any bills in. So that might be a bit of, if you're fooling around about getting pricing anyway, might be a good idea to also see what kind of savings afterwards would be. Like, if you go, it'd be hard sell to get people to switch to a heat pump if the savings isn't there after, or if there's no difference really. And I don't know if there is. So my only main question right now is, when you're talking about a heat pump, are you talking about geothermal? Oh, okay.
No.
Okay. So that should be part of the equation too, geothermal, because I think there are some people that have done that.
Yes. Yeah, there are for sure.
Okay, I see Anna, and then Mike Jordan, and then Mike Sullivan.
I don't remember the timeline that loan was paid back, but obviously the cost came way down, and for this young person, the cost of the loan was paid back over quite a short period of time. But as I understand it, heat pumps use the heat in the house, so the house has to be very well insulated, and so it's somehow a means of using the heat that's within the house to both heat and cool the house. I'm not quite sure how it works, but it's different from geothermal. But anyway, so I think the loan is paid off over a short period of time. And I think, Jody, you found that with the solar panel, it was paid back over a short period of time too, right? When you installed solar panel? Yeah, anyway.
Well, yeah, no, they I don't actually own them, but that's a whole other story.
Okay, Mike Jordan, then Mike Sullivan.
A lot of us already own heat pumps, but we call them air conditioners. And the heat pump that we're talking about here should do the reverse of what an air conditioner does, and that is bring the heat in. Those of us who have run central air in the summer know what it does to hydro bills, getting back to what Bonnie was asking about. And my understanding is that if you can get ground source heat or geothermal, it is a whole lot more efficient, and it will look after both heating the house and air conditioning and also the hot water situation. So there's a real good reason for trying to get as many people as possible onto ground source heat. The other thing that, while I have the floor, I was thinking about convincing the city to put their tenders out for electric vehicles. And I'm thinking of the pickup trucks and the vans and all the smaller vehicles that they have, would set a wonderful example. And it would also have a special side effect in that if the police vehicles were included in that, I think we would see a big change in the reduction in idling around this city. Because when you have an electric vehicle and you shut it down, it is shut down. When you have a gas operated vehicle, a lot of the staff that work for the city and the police and everybody else that sort of goes around and makes service calls tend to leave their vehicles running, which I think is such an absolutely horrible example to set for the community.
Okay, we'll be speaking about the idling bylaw next also, so we can just hold comments off on that until Chris joins us. I'm going to turn it to Mike Sullivan.
So in terms of buses, the federal government today announced an additional pile of money for the municipalities to purchase electric buses, and announced which factories would be building these electric buses. I don't know if that's if the city of Stratford is planning on accessing some of that money. I would hope they would, but it was announced this afternoon by Catherine McKenna, who is the Minister of Infrastructure. In terms of Anna's comment about heat pumps, it wasn't quite accurate that heat pumps, what heat pumps do is move heat from outdoors to indoors. And even at 0 degrees, there is heat outdoors that you can extract and move to indoors. An air-to-air heat pump takes heat out of the air, even at very cold temperatures, and moves it to indoors. It, of course, is more efficient if your house doesn't leak heat. And so Mike is right to suggest that at the same time as you're moving to a heat pump type system, you need to make sure that your house is sealed tight and has good windows and has lots of insulation, if you can do that. The reason I mentioned air or heat pumps is because they are by far the most efficient way to heat electrically, being about between 20 and 80% more efficient than just having an electric heater. But the significant advantage of moving to electric is you're no longer burning fossil fuels, and that's what we have to be cognizant of at every step of the way. The ground source heat pump that is using water that's circulated about 8 or 6 feet underground is much more expensive to install initially because you have to excavate. But as Mike was saying, or one of you was saying earlier, that if the city is excavating streets anyway, why not lay the pipes down and offer the residents the already heated water? Essentially, what you're doing with that is you're only having to warm the liquid from the 50 degrees that it is, or 10 to 12 degrees it is all year round. Even when it's cold out, it's still 10 to 12 degrees. That's why the water coming out of your tap never freezes. If that's what you're using to heat your home, it's way cheaper than an air-to-air heat source. But air-to-air is quite doable. It's just more expensive to use than ground source. If you use ground source and you're doing it all yourself, it's way more expensive to install because you have to put in all that piping under your backyard, and that's a big excavation and a lot of work. If the city's doing it for you, way, way cheaper. All of these are great ideas. The point is, from my perspective, is that aiming at 10% doesn't really allow us the opportunity to explore these big ideas, because we're not thinking big. We're thinking small. We're thinking incrementally. You know, the whole notion of if we're all driving electric cars, anti-idling bylaws have absolutely no impact. but anti-idling bylaws are great, but they are only a very tiny percentage of the actual problem that is facing us. And until we can convince people to switch their cars out to electric and switch their homes to electric, and all those businesses and industries to move from heating with natural gas, we'll never reach zero, and we have to reach zero by 2050. So I just wanted to make those clarifications on what a heat pump does, on what a ground source heat pump is, and the fact that the federal government just announced $3.7 billion to buy buses. Let's get in line.
Thank you. Jeff, I see your hand up.
If I understand correctly about the 10% number reduction, Rebecca, you're talking about that as a county countywide number. Is it possible, or is it, I don't know, maybe you're you're intending to do this anyway? Is it likely that we'll see a higher target for say Stratford and St. Mary's than the rest of Perth County, or is there going to be a as Jody was saying, a sort of a tiered approach that would entice say Perth South to share some of the costs. So are we as Stratford, are we looking at a higher a higher recommendation potentially?
Basically, I'm going to present the information. At the end of the day, it'll be up to council, because if we don't reach that 30% or that 15% or that 20%, then it does come back to council and their responsibility to constituents. So my plan is to present all of the information and allow council to be able to make a more comfortable decision on what they feel the best target will be for the city of Stratford. Obviously, in the last council meeting, we can see there's a lot of passion with our Stratford council. So there may be a higher reduction target. And that's something I think we can discuss more with council for sure. And
Bonnie?
sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Bonnie?
I just wanted to let Mike know that last year, the police department bought 2 hybrid and 1 gas powered. And the idea is in 2020, they're going to do a comparison as a pilot project, a direct cost comparison between the 2. And if everything happens the way it should, they're going to be switching to more hybrids. The hybrids were running around $5,000 more than the regular. So they're going to, so I'm thinking we should, I don't know what month they actually purchased them, but I think we should ask them for an update on how it's going. And I guess I have another question is, how does the hybrid fit in, like in the scale of coming down, what are the best cars? Is it like electric first and then hybrid? And then, is there a, does anybody know which order it actually goes in? Like what are the best energy efficient ones that give off less greenhouse gases?
Rebecca, I'm in the interest of time, I'm going to ask you to give a really brief rundown of that. I'm just mindful that we're already an hour into this meeting and we still have quite a big agenda.
I would say it would definitely be electric first, the plug-in hybrid electric. would be your next one, a hybrid, and then obviously your gas. And then, I mean, the ideal I think would be a hydrogen fueled vehicle, but those are slowly coming back into the conversation.
Jody?
Yeah, very, very quick question. There was just thinking back about buses. Are the diesel buses of the city, is that included in this? Is this captured in this information? No. Okay. Just was curious about that. The other thing to point out is like this program, there are a lot of federal programs that are coming online that can help us. And like when we look at fleet vehicles, if we're looking at replacing gas with electric, it's going to increase the cost, but on the other side of that, there may be federal programs that we can get that would help us with that cost. So those things also have to be taken into consideration when we set our goals. This is a 9-year goal. So over the next 9 years, let's hope that the federal government is going to pony up some more money to help us be able to achieve a more ambitious goal.
So looking at this and hearing from Rebecca that she has a meeting tomorrow, during which I think you said, Rebecca, that that's when you find out when you're presenting to Stratford Council, is that right? So is there some action that we should take as the E&E committee tonight to kind of support this work?
I think Chris might be talking more about that specifically, what the E&E can work towards. He called me yesterday and let me know that he would be talking a bit more about that.
Yeah, he has 2 items that he's going to be speaking with us about, but it's not, like, I guess I'm wondering, should we make a recommendation from the committee about setting X% as the target?
That's a good question.
It may be hard for you to answer, Rebecca, but I'm kind of putting it out to the committee because we meet monthly. So if we don't decide on that tonight, then we may be too late. Any thoughts on that? I see Jody and Mike. Okay, so we'll go Jody, then Mike Sullivan.
Well, I was just going to say, maybe we should hear from Chris first, and then we can figure out what the next step is. But I don't know what Mike said.
Mike?
I think we have to say something. If Chris is going to give us some guidance, great. But one of the reasons that council agreed to defer until their next meeting is because E&E hadn't had a chance to look at this yet. So we better be saying something when we're done.
I agree. Okay, well, on that note, Rebecca, why don't we turn things over to Chris? And it'd be great if you can stay on for that discussion. And then, I mean, you're more than welcome to stay for the entire meeting, but we won't be offended if you bow out after Chris's portion of the agenda. Hi, Chris. Welcome. I'm going to turn the floor over to you, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. So the main item that I wanted to bring forward tonight, just in respect to current undertakings that staff have as a result of the report that went to council on the 22nd. So as was discussed, the target and adopting the initiatives in principle was deferred. But council did approve staff reporting back on 3 initiatives, being the Idling Bylaw, electric vehicle charging stations, and corporate adoption of the One Planet Living principles. So what I was hoping to bring forward to the committee was to look to see if there was interest in leading a review of the Idling Bylaw. So I would see this as something along the lines of looking at what other municipalities are doing, seeing perhaps where we can improve within our own bylaw, just because it was adopted a number of years ago. There's also some areas that can be looked at in terms of education, just because recognizing that enforcement of contravention is difficult under this bylaw, and education campaigns have often worked well in other municipalities. So kind of thinking about what that might look like, discussion around signage. There's been comments made about idling at schools in recent discussions around the parking and school safety zones, as well as discussion about idling when people are waiting to pick up food with the pickup of takeout during COVID. So that's kind of what I wanted to bring forward tonight in terms of having the committee take a lead on the review of that and work with staff to prepare some recommendations. If that's something that the committee could take on, I think perhaps we could look at having some findings brought back to the April meeting, and then we can go from there in terms of next steps. Just based on some of the conversation earlier about different initiatives and making recommendations to council, just because the deferral of the target was meant to carry on further discussion until Rebecca's community plan came back and taking a look at what that entailed. I think perhaps based on the discussion about initiatives, so hearing about the electric buses, charging stations, the green bin program, green development standards. So those are all initiatives that we had in the staff report that went to council. So I'm wondering if perhaps if the committee was interested or wanting to make some kind of recommendation, that it be more so focused in the area of supporting certain initiatives, just until council has an opportunity to review the community plan and have further discussions about setting a target.
Chris, so do you mean that the committee would make a motion recommending that staff investigates X part of the plan that you came up with, instead of saying this is what what we think the target should be? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, so just a suggestion based off of the conversation that's been taking place. It sounds like there's interest in a number of initiatives that staff did bring forward that could be investigated further. And council will have an opportunity to decide, if they wish to adopt in principle those initiatives and perhaps give further direction on any additional initiatives that they wish to have staff report back on. So the 3 that were approved, all 3 of those were in the initiatives list as well, but were just 3 that staff had put forward as 3 that could feasibly be done this year or reviewed this year. So perhaps given that there's going to be a future opportunity to have a decision and discussion by council on the list of initiatives in principle, the E&E committee could perhaps list a number of those for support that they would like to see council give direction on.
Okay. Bonnie, and then Sammy.
So I was the one that originally brought the Idling Bylaw to City Council and got it approved in 2001. So I did a review of it and I checked out a few of them around our area. Toronto's changed their anti-idling bylaw to no more than 1 minute in a 60-minute period. And they also removed the temperature section. So I had suggested that we could I think I sent this, January 7th. I think we could easily make a motion to take out the temperature section of the bylaw and reduce it to 1 minute. Now, having said that, if anybody else wants to review it or look at it, or would you like me just to make that motion?
Bonnie, you're cutting out. You're in like slow-mo talking. Can you repeat the last bit?
Oh, I guess everybody's froze up.
No, she's frozen.
Sure. Here. The last part I said was, do you want, just a minute, I'll read it again. I think we can easily make a motion to take out the temperature section of the bylaw and reduce it to 1 minute. Would you like me to make that motion? And then the staff can go away and start working on the anti-idling one.
Okay, I see Tatiana with her hand up, and I'm gonna defer to her because she's the expert.
So through the chair, if I could respectfully recommend that the committee take some time with this and come back with a comprehensive recommendation for any changes. What we don't want to do is present a piecemeal recommendation report to council. We'd like to come back with one report, recommend that the original idling bylaw be repealed and that a new bylaw be adopted in its place. So if there are multiple recommendations, we would like it to come as one, please and thank you.
Yeah, that makes sense. So essentially, Chris, you're asking for like a little working group on the idling bylaw to form and then have something to come back to the full committee with by our next April meeting, right?
Yes, that was the intent behind that.
For that part.
I'll
So
volunteer for that.
yeah, okay, I am happy to join that too. And Jody, are you raising your hand again? Okay, cool. Does that work for everyone? The three of us. Bonnie, are you raising your hand to join us as well?
No, I'm raising my hand to make a comment.
Because you know it's going to be a fun group.
Yeah, of course.
You can make a comment.
Well, I'm just wondering, the three initiatives.
Yeah.
So how we approach it, are those three initiatives linked to us meeting the greenhouse gas emissions target? So is it we set a target and staff investigate how those initiatives would contribute to helping reach that target? Are they connected? Because to me, it seems you can connect them to the target. So instead of looking at those separate, I'm just putting that up for discussion, whether it's better to set a target and how do those fit? How do those three initiatives fit in reaching that target?
I understand. Chris, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so through the chair, the initiatives that were identified in the report and those three that you mentioned specifically, all in some way at different amounts, obviously will contribute towards a reduction. The purpose of providing the initiatives was to provide a starting point for items that staff could, or council could direct staff to investigate further and bring back reports on with more detail about costs and requirements and perhaps information about how it contributes to a reduction. It's difficult to not have a target and be looking at initiatives because often in other municipalities, the target has been set prior to having a plan. And so again, the initiatives are really just a starting point as it stands now until we have a target and can start working on that plan.
Okay, Mike Jorna.
A target is a really abstract thing, and it's easy to latch onto a target and say, yeah, that's a great idea. And yet, if we're going to reach the ultimate target, which is net carbon zero by 2050, I think that we have to certainly go through the exercise of setting targets. But I think one of the functions of our committee would be to provide council with guidance on how to meet or how to take certain actions that would help meet whatever target they set. So in view of that, I would like to make a motion that will have a relatively limited impact on carbon, but could have a great impact on social marketing. And that is, I would like to recommend that council include in its tender calls the specification that their vehicles for purchase be electric. And I specifically say electric because I hear you that the police are buying hybrids, but as far as I can understand, a hybrid for a car that stays in town or within 30 kilometers doesn't make a lot of sense, because electrics will have the range that staff cars will need, and electrics will also have the battery power that the radio system will need. So my motion is that council specify electric for its vehicle tenders, and I should modify that and say for its small vehicle tenders. I think the buses and the big trucks are another issue. So if I can find a seconder for that motion, I'd appreciate it.
I see Mike Sullivan raising his hand. Is that to second it or to speak? To second it. Okay, any discussion on that, Jody?
Yeah, I would just say I guess the term that we're using probably is fleet vehicles as opposed to other transportation. So small fleet vehicles. I guess it's just more of an overarching question. So it's kind of similar to what Bonnie was asking. So are we wrapping this in, or is this completely separate from? So yeah, it makes it easier if we had the target set. So is this getting rolled into the plan that we have, or is this sort of a separate item that we would like council to consider separately? Or are we going to put it on the plate with the plan for general carbon reduction? Like, I'm wondering strategically where this should sit.
I think it should be on the plate, right, Chris?
I do know that on a large scale, it is something that is difficult to incorporate all at once, and something that I think very preliminary discussions have been held. But again, just in looking at reviewing of when we were talking about the electric vehicle charging stations, there is an intent to start looking in that direction, but not on a large scale, and kind of starting progressing slowly towards a certain goal, rather than all at once starting to tender for electric vehicles.
Well, I see this as a one-off small step to make something happen right away, something that'll make council feel very good about doing it, and something that'll be a great example for the community. If you roll it all into some sort of a report, it'll end up being such a long list of things that it's likely to get lost. I would like to see this considered all by itself, because I think it would be a significant move.
Mike, you're so convincing. Bonnie, I see your hand up, and then we have a motion on the floor, right, Casey? So we have to decide if we're going to vote on it shortly. But Bonnie, I'll turn it to you.
Okay. So at our last transit meeting, we were talking about electric buses and things like that. And part of the issue that the manager was explaining to us is that you would get, like, our buses run from 6 in the morning to 10 at night. You can't get that long a charge off a bus. So we would actually have to have more buses, some that are charging back at the transit station. There's also talk about when they pull in to the station that, they could have a thing there that they could charge up for 2 or 3 minutes when they're wait at the terminal. So that was one of the concerns. And, as technology evolves, it's just like the Tesla, look at the difference in that. How just in a few, 4 or 5 years, how much it's come down and how much more proficient their batteries and everything are. It's like anything, when something new is coming out, they learn more. And so that was a concern about that. And I'm not sure why the police decided to go with the hydrogen, whether it had to do with, like, they do, they take care of St. Mary's, and I think, well, they're looking at another place right now, but whether that has anything to do with the fact of I know my son-in-law just bought a Tesla, and like he said, they don't get as much time on the road with it in the wintertime. You know, the cold makes a big difference. So they've noticed a decrease in how much time they get. So those are also things that play into it, because we also have to make sure that the vehicles are ready to for staff to work at, and you have to put all the charging stations in, and like we wouldn't have room at the bus terminal right now for the charging stations. We'd have to build something. So there's all those costs involved. But when you're planning something and you know, making a budget out for lots of things in council, we budget out 10 years now. So there's no reason why it can't be started to be added to a budget line. And I know staff are, you know, like Chris said, they're starting to look at it. So, but those are some of the concerns I've heard.
Okay, does the committee want to vote on this motion that Mike has put forward and other Mike has seconded? Jody's raising her hand to say yes. Do you want
Well,
to?
no, I was just going to say I have one more thought. So
Okay.
that's usually kind of the way it happens at council too. Like we second the motion and then we have a big discussion about it to see whether we want to. So this is the right time to be doing that part.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if would we consider putting into that motion I know that hybrids aren't as desirable, but what about plug-in hybrid like the Volt that Mike was talking about? Maybe, so we're talking about staff fleet vehicles. So we're talking about smaller cars. If we went with something that could be plugged into a standard outlet as opposed to having a fancy charging station, would that make it more palatable where we don't have a bunch of infrastructure necessary to get these vehicles going? Like, do we want to include something in the motion saying it could be this or that, you know, working towards an all electric fleet? I do think that the motion, the way it is, it means that as we get new vehicles, you know, we'll slowly be building up our fleet. So it's not like if we voted this in that overnight we'd have to get rid of all our gas vehicles, right? It's going to be over time. So that's a good thing. So it's a built-in sort of gradual program, which I like. So those are just a couple thoughts.
Okay, back to you, Mike Jordan, in terms of considering the hybrid.
We are an advisory committee. We're suggesting that council go in a certain direction. They can do that. If the police commission or the police department have a great concern and good reason to go hybrid rather than all electric, they will be sure to let council know about this, and council will have the ability and the power to listen to their reason as much as to ours and make the change.
I'm still muted. So further discussion on this motion then. Vonnie.
Yeah, I think we want to go back to what Chris was saying and whether this motion goes into those three things, Mike. That's what I'm wondering, whether we're back to what Chris was saying about the three initiatives. Does that fit in there? That will be done in that initiative, in one of those initiatives?
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. Chris, can you answer that?
So my understanding is that it wouldn't at this time, only because so council's provided direction on those three initiatives to be reported back on in the 3 months. So if this were to go forward, it would be on its own, but would obviously be contributing towards a potential plan.
Thank you. That makes sense. Further discussion on this motion. Mike Sullivan, you have your hand up, right?
Thank you. So the just because somebody said it, I want to correct the record about charging electric buses. It takes 3 hours to charge an electric bus from completely empty to completely full. The TTC in Toronto now operates the largest fleet of electric buses in North America. And they have arranged that the buses have a long route in the morning with long distances, covering to 250 kilometers, then they partially charge it and put it on a short route in the afternoon, so it doesn't get completely depleted. I don't know how long Stratford's routes are and how long those buses would go, but I can't imagine they'd be as long as the longest route in Toronto, which goes from one end of the city to the other. Anyway, that's just to correct that piece of the record. Thanks.
Well, I just want to comment back on that. Like, we only have 15 buses and 3 of them are used for student, and then a couple are like sort of backup buses, right? So you have 6 buses out there Monday to Friday, and they just go all day long. So what they've looked into is, you're probably right, yeah, it can charge it, but we would have, if you just find one bus at a time, like, you know, we usually buy a bus a year type thing, right? So, and that's where they would run into some problems. Like, once they get them all electric, it's ensuring that you're not going to have a breakdown on the road. And Toronto would have a lot more buses for sure. And probably a lot more places that they can set up charging stations along the way to give them partial charges, right? And I don't know what their wait time is when they're pulling in, so.
Tatiana, I see your hand up.
So through the chair, if I could just respectfully make a recommendation, there is a motion on the floor and comments really should be focused on that motion. Then the motion should be put to a question, and then following that, discussion can continue. And again, just noticing the time of the meeting, it might be helpful just to continue on with the meeting items. Respectfully.
No, I appreciate that. Okay, so then we should take a vote on this motion, right? And you've got it, Casey. So those in favor, please raise your hand. And those opposed? So weird looking, like trying to see everyone's hands. Okay, looks like that's passed. So Chris, back to you. We've established the kind of research group for the idling bylaw. The 2 other points, the electric charging stations and the One Living Planet, it's my understanding that you're not really looking at this point for a similar approach. Like, you're not looking for a research group from this committee on those 2 points, correct?
Through the chair, that would be correct. So staff, the One Planet Living Principles is more of an administrative fix as it relates to adjusting our report template. The vehicle charging stations, staff are going to be reviewing and bringing a report back on that.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Anna?
Chris, I just wanted to know, I just printed out the One Planet principles. Would this, the One Planet framework be something then that you frame the city's plan with? So you don't need us to recommend the adoption of the One Planet principles?
So the intent with the One Planet principles is that they would be placed on in some form through our management report template, so that staff are able to, similarly to the strategic initiatives that are currently on the report template, that staff can apply to a report that's being brought forward. The One Planet Living Principles would similarly be listed or applied as such.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Sammy, I see your hand up.
I just was thinking of going back to the motion that was brought up about energy environment making a suggestion for the target. Since we are an advisory committee for council, and I know the target, we've been talking about it a lot, and I think we do need to make a target, get that target, and start working towards it. So I think that we should make a recommendation to council that they make a better target than 10%, reaching for not an insane target, but an achievable, ambitious goal.
So Sammy, do you have a number in mind, a percentage?
more than 10% and up to 30%. So maybe we could start with 30, and if they don't want to aim for 30, they'll see that we recommend that. So hopefully they'll do higher than 10.
Okay, so that is your motion. Do you have a seconder? Mike Sullivan is seconding. And now I can open the floor for discussion. No one's raising their hands. Or did Mike Sullivan raise it? Mike and then Jeff.
Thanks. And Sammy, that's great. I think we should be recommending a 30% target, end of story, and let council try and argue their way out of it. We need to reach 30% by 2030, according to the Canada and Paris targets, and 100% by 2050. So 10% isn't going to get us there.
Agreed. Jeff?
Yeah, I just to add to that, I thought it. I mean, I was really impressed by the way that Rebecca laid out the survey process. I mean, a lot of these sort of climate and carbon footprint studies are either they suffer from being massively oversimplified, or they're, you need a degree in environmental sciences to figure out, But I think Rebecca's I think the aim of the survey in terms of getting to a target that is feasible and has a lot of public buy-in is important. So I think Mike is right, and if if we have data, even preliminary data, that says that the Stratford residents are willing, or Perth County residents are willing to countenance a 30% target, then that should be reinforced as as a whereas clause in Sammy's motion. And I know that sample sizes being what they are, it's not it's not perhaps the most healthiest sample that we could ask for, but we do have having that public buy-in, I think, is extremely significant.
Well, and she had a lot more responses on her survey than previous projects that the city's undertaken that they have accepted as public engagement. Mike Jorna.
I think your motion is spot on, Sammy, because 30% over the next 9-10 years is going to get, if anything, what somebody already called the low-hanging fruit. And then to still have only 20 years to do the remaining 70% is going to be a real challenge unless technology gives us some easy fixes, which, as Rebecca mentioned earlier, might come about through hydrogen technology. But yes, you made the right motion. Thank you.
Okay, let's Jody. Oh, and Tatiana. Okay, Jody and then Tatiana.
Oh, I was just going to ask, are you going to add in the survey recommendation part to the motion, or like that Jeff was talking about?
Like mentioning that that's what the survey found?
I think he was suggesting that as part of the motion, it could say, whereas this, the survey says that the community supported that, whatever. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to defer to Tatiana. What do you recommend?
So through the chair, I was actually going to ask for clarification. So from my understanding, the motion on the floor is that the Energy and Environment Committee recommends Stratford City Council adopt a 30% target. So my first question would be, under what level? So 30% under 2017 levels, under 2005 levels, under 1990 levels. That seems to be a big issue when discussing this item. Then I think the second part of the motion is that the city aimed to be net zero by 2050. looking to Sammy just to make sure that you wanted that included. And then I definitely think, Casey, we can add in some language around the survey results. I would note the survey was all of Perth County. It was not limited Stratford residents. So when we're taking that number into account, we do need to recognize that it was all of Perth County who were submitting responses. So Sammy, was it 2030, 30% under which baseline?
I think that, Rebecca, you were basing off of the 2017 baseline, right? So I think that since Rebecca's data is from there, we should probably stick to that baseline. I'm asking Rebecca's opinion on this one.
So that was 2017 baseline was the 10% reduction in the staff report.
So I'm just checking with Rebecca if she thinks that's a good baseline to stick with.
It's definitely the most recent data. I know that the consulting company that Stratford had hired before did gather a baseline data for 2005. So if you wanted to use that to align with federal provincial, you can do that instead. Just keeping in mind that federal provincial targets are not ambitious either. So you have both baselines available to you. So I would say, you know, use your discretion on what you feel is achievable.
Jody?
I'm just curious, Rebecca, do you have that number available? Because I don't know what that is. So
2005?
Yes.
Let me see. I may have it.
And the other thing about the survey, my understanding was that approximately 500 of the 900 and whatever responses were Stratford based. Is that correct, Rebecca?
I believe so. Yeah, majority were from the city of Stratford.
Yeah, so 500 or so would have been sort of Stratford based responses in that survey.
And the 2005 baseline that I have, that includes like comparable data from what I calculated, was about 323,000-ish.
So higher than yours?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So perhaps we should not be using the 2005 unless we want a higher target.
So ultimately, this is a decision for the committee about what the baseline year is. So Sammy, you created the motion. Mike Sullivan, I see your hand up. Do you want to weigh in on which year we should use as the baseline?
I think we have to use 2017. It's too complicated to figure out. I don't know because Sammy's or Rebecca's data doesn't include industrial emissions. I don't know how comparable they really are, but we have City of Stratford excluding industrial as of 2017. That's what that's the number we know. That's the most recent number. And I think aiming at 30% may be larger than the federal or the provincial government or the federal government is asking, but why not be larger?
Okay, so Sammy, does that sound good? Then we have the motion on that it's from 2017 numbers. And Tatiana, you said we need to decide on the second part of it about if it's 0 by 2050. Was that the second part?
So through the chair, my recommendation would be that giving consideration to the survey results, and the Energy and Environment Committee recommends council adopt a 30% target, 30% emissions reduction target using 2017 baseline, and that a 50% that net zero be achieved by 2050. And I looked to the mover and seconder just to make sure that that accurately captures the intent of your motion.
Okay, I'm seeing thumbs up. I'm seeing nods. So that is the motion. Thank you, Tatiana, for your help with that. Are we ready to vote? Yes, we are. Let me see. All in favor? Okay, great. Any opposed? No. Okay, that is passed. Thank you, guys. We did it. we're almost halfway through the agenda. Okay, so moving on, we're getting updates from the working groups, and just reiterate, being mindful of time. So the ecological, Vonnie, do you want to quickly update us? Do you have an update?
I know we haven't met. Craig thought we could meet and I don't see him here. So
Okay.
no, we no update. So they're mindful of time.
Okay, great. Anna, do you want to provide, I hope that everyone read the minutes from your meeting. Certainly busy. Is there anything in addition to the minutes you want to share with the committee?
We're meeting next Friday, the 12th. So if you have any ideas for hosts or panelists or the title of the webinars, please get it to us by then. What we are considering these four or five ideas from April, May, and June. One would be having Rebecca and Chris present. Green economy was an idea. Reducing energy, our heat light, reducing our carbon footprint, climate through an Indigenous lens, and we would really appreciate feedback about panelists for that. The green economy, and then the other idea we had, which we thought we'd like to ask whether the ecological group might like to take on the webinar for June. We were thinking of, climate action in your yard and garden, but there was also discussion about an invasive species. So that's the only thing, is to ask whether ecological would be willing to take on a webinar in June related to yards, gardens,
Craig and I have been in touch with Stratford field naturalists through Anita, and also Jay at Upper Thames about presenting on invasive species, and he proposed June, so that works well. And I see Vonnie nodding, so I know that he's happy to help. Mike Sullivan. Oh, you're muted.
I got a positive response from my professor at York about presenting on the economics of climate change and the economics of carbon reduction.
Great. Well, that's wonderful. We can discuss, we'll decide on Friday, and maybe by then we'll know what the status for Rebecca and Chris is in terms of their reports, and we can look at the schedule of what we should put first. So we'll do that on Friday. So any thoughts you have on panelists' ideas, feed them to us. Thank you.
And also, Anna has set up a meeting with Bonnie, myself, and Mike Bites at the city to talk about promoting. Oh, and Emily Skelding too, about promoting those webinars.
Okay, I forgot about that. Thank you.
Oh, I see Emily has her hand up. Right?
Yeah, just to Anna, did we need to get any input for the name of our webinar series? Was that deadline still today that we wanted to get back to?
I think we don't have time really to discuss it, so I'm inviting you, if you have any ideas about the title or description, to get your ideas to us before we meet next Friday on the 12th, and then we'll make a decision based on what we hear back from you.
Okay, thank you.
I know that Anne Carbert wanted to know tonight, but I think things are still kind of up in the air, so I think we can deal with that. We'll figure out on Friday because we don't really have time to discuss it today.
Okay, the Avon River Shoreline, there's not really an update. Craig just he texted me, he finished off the kayak launch, and it looks really great. So walk down by there and check it out. Nature Canada update. Mike Sullivan, I turn it to you.
I sent the whole committee several things, but most notably is that National Resources Canada has set aside money now for tree planting. And there are two calls for proposals. One is for a quick win, but you have to plant a minimum of 5,000 trees. And so there aren't 5,000 trees available, as far as I can tell from talking to the person at the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority who is involved in this. I sent you his email, I think. And so I don't think we're going to be qualified for that, but there is a longer term initiative from National Resources Canada that I have sent to him as well. I'm not sure who should be talking to these people. It shouldn't, I can't be me. I'm not a representative of anything, but somebody needs to be contacting National Resources Canada saying, yes, please put us on a list for, and it's a request for, it's an RFI that needs to be created. And I'm not sure who, whether it's the Conservation Authority or the city or who, but you all have the document. So feel free to decide who.
Bonnie, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I think, Mike, if we can take it over with the Ecological Committee, I haven't talked to Bonnie and Jody, mention it to Emily and Craig, and then we can work with John at the authority, and we can work with Quinn in the city, pushing that through, getting something and seeing. Yeah, like John said, there's not a lot of money. Like they, and
Not a lot of trees.
Not a lot of trees, and it takes time to grow these trees. So
Yeah.
So, but we can look at that. We could take that over.
Okay, back to my agenda. Thank you. That's awesome. Mike, back to you for the update on energy efficient building requirements.
So I sent you all again today a course description for learning what passive houses are all about. I've registered. It's $220 plus PST and HST in Vancouver, and it apparently comes with a copy of the slides, so I'll send you all a copy of the slides when I'm done, so you can understand what it's about. I haven't had any response from the city as far as what can be done in terms of development charges and tax relief and those kinds of things. I don't know where that's at. Maybe Chris knows, but that's who has this now.
Yeah, I think based on the last meeting minutes, Tatiana was looking into that. Is that right, Tatiana? Keep calling on these guys.
Through the chair, yes, I don't have anything to report as of yet. The second that I do, I'll send an email just recognizing that you do only meet monthly, and that way we're getting the information to you as quickly as possible.
Jody? Thank you. Jody?
Yeah, I just had a quick comment on that. That I mentioned earlier, that Whitby has a green development. So they call themselves Whitby Green Development, and it is a full municipal program with incentives and things. So if Tatiana, if you want to look at that as a possible model, like they've done a lot of groundwork as far as what can be done in the building code, what's allowed. It seems like a really good model to me, but I'm kind of new to it too, so.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Mike Sullivan?
So there is one more thing. Other people have asked me whether or not the Cooper site development will be passively heated, whether it will be a fully green, energy efficient, completely carbon neutral development. I noticed the parking lot, for example, is not permeable paving. So I would ask that somebody outside this committee report to the committee on what environmental standards are being set by this pretty big development. And if they aren't good enough, can we make recommendations about it?
Jody, are there any plans for developing that site?
Well, there's overarching kind of a plan, vision sort of thing, but not the nuts and bolts details yet, even down to those kind of things. I know things like solar roof and so on were proposed. So yeah, as time goes on, there's going to be more and more available to us to make that building even better. So yeah, once plans start going ahead, that's when that piece of the conversation is going to have to come to the forefront.
Okay, back to Mike. You're muted.
Sorry. The concern that was raised to me was that nobody'd heard anything about this for some time and didn't know if the draft plans that were already out there from a consulting firm had already started. So thank you, Jody, for that. But if we could get some kind of update as to where things are at, maybe council can do that, but just people are asking what's happening.
Bonnie?
All I can suggest is we have the Grand Trunk if you Google it on the city website, you can find everything that's there. Like Jody was talking about solar panels on the roof and different stuff, but it's really not anywhere yet. We've been applying for grants and then COVID hit and we're supposed to be looking at it shortly again. So we'll see where we're at. We've had as you know, we've had a lot of issues this last year and things have been working on, and we're behind on a lot of things and we're slowly getting caught up.
Okay. So something to be aware of moving forward, that when there starts to be progress on that project, we could have someone come speak to us about it and then see what might make sense as a committee. So yeah. So Jody, can you keep us appraised of that?
Sure. Yeah. As soon as we get some money, that's when it's going to start rolling.
Just find the money. I actually have to go pick up Ruby, so I'm going to turn the floor over to Anna, and yeah, I'll see you guys soon. The recommendation, I know my name is on the recommendation about phasing out Ontario's gas plants, but it's really just a discussion on if we want to adopt one of the other municipalities' motions and if there's any changes we want to make for that wording. Okay, so Anna, you're okay to take over?
Okay, thank you.
Thank
So
you.
we're
Bye,
on-
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Have we finished to 6C now? We're on 6D.
I just wanted to say that Lauren Bolton did a very thorough report that he presented way back when we were having the open houses about the, well, we were calling it the Cooper site now we're calling it the Grand Trunk. But he did a very thorough report. Mike Jorner probably knows Lauren Bolton. He's been an environmentalist for years, and you know, he's made his whole home energy efficient, and he sent in about solar panels and everything, and he did like a cost evaluation. Now I don't know if that's on the website or not. I'd have to look.
Okay. Are we finished with that item? And moving on now to D. Okay, great. Sammy, I think that's you. Reusable program.
Yes, so a couple weeks ago we had our first meeting regarding the reusable takeout container. It went really well. We had a lot of good discussions. We've summarized what came out of it. A lot of it is regarding concerns and ideas. We've brought in some main points that we have, some of them being communication, city responsibilities, a restaurant association, storage, pickup, cleaning, just some main things, and we've put them on sections. It came to our attention a program called A Friendlier Company. We've emailed them, reached out to them, and we have a meeting tomorrow with them to discuss if they would be interested in coming to Stratford or just meeting and talking it over. Just while I have the floor, I'm going to give a quick update on Eco Club just so that I don't have to bring it up during new business if that's okay. It'll be really brief. So we are planning to present to you guys Energy Environment in April regarding the compost cow. We received the bins that were funded by this committee, and we hope to get them started and using soon. And another project we've just started, we're working with the Green Industries course, and where the portables used to be in front of the school, they've now been taken down. So it's kind of a muddy, grassy, not so good looking area. So we're hoping to get some trees, maybe gardens, some benches, like an outdoor classroom out in the front. And that's a new project we're starting. So that's my update.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Now moving on to E, which is the recommendation to phase out Ontario's gas plants, which Emily was going to discuss. I think we left it last time that we would look at making adopting a motion at this meeting. Is that what everybody remembers? Giving people a chance to look at the documents presented by Mr. Gibb. What's his name? I've forgotten now. Mr. Gibbons. do we have a motion that we were looking at, Casey?
No, I don't have a motion.
Okay. I think it was you, Mike, Jorna, that suggested we put this off to this meeting. Do you think we're ready to do a motion, or?
Well, there are two ways of going about it. One of them is to just endorse some of the other motions that are flying around. Or the other one, which I think is more effective, is for the city of Stratford to write its own resolution and send it on to the province. And I think that's the way we should go. And if you like, I would volunteer to write a resolution for this committee to consider for council for the next meeting.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, thank you. Yeah. Okay, great. And that'll give Emily a chance to come back to it too. So we don't need a motion for that, do we? No. Okay, great. Thank you. Then the next item, ground source heating options for the city. Here we go.
Anna, I just had a couple points. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
That's okay. Just for Mike, if you were putting that together, I think I had a couple points about Kingston. I looked at their motion and I think they had a lot of good information, so it's worthwhile to check Kingston's motion out. And I think that we should, once we have that put together, I think we should include it to the federal government as well, just so that they know what's going on and that they know Stratford wants this to happen. And I think in that motion, when you're putting it together, we should mention that we have declared an emergency declaration so that it can like tie in with that. Those are just a few points I had.
Great. Very good
I mean,
point.
our political system could use your expertise.
Gradually, we're getting it there, bit by bit. It's great. Thank you, Sammy. Okay. All right. So are we ready to move on to ground source heating options? Mike, Jorna, and Tatiana Defoe.
Well, Tatiana was going to check with somebody on staff about the possibility that I suggested that maybe we could start including heat source, ground source heat as part of a municipal infrastructure type program. And have you found out anything, Tatiana?
So through the vice chair, as noted at the last committee meeting, our director of infrastructure and development services has recently retired, and he would really be the best person to come and present to the committee. With that being said, he is still on working on a few projects, and he actually was attending a session on this very topic. So once the session was held, he was going to touch base with me to see what information or presentation could be provided, and then we'll prepare to schedule this at an upcoming meeting.
Look forward to it.
Great, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. I imagine if we do the webinar too on carbon reduction, this is something that'll come up in our discussion in the webinar as well. Okay, thank you. Kate's not here. Campaign to reduce food waste. So I guess that was to be Kate Simpson, but I guess she's not able to attend today. Did we hear anything from her, Casey?
No, she didn't send an update for that.
Okay, so we'll put that off to the next meeting. I did notice that one of the things she's asking is that if we do have takeout food, that we take pictures of our containers and send them to her, so that she's putting together some kind of a display of what can go in and what doesn't go into the recycling. Okay, if that's everything in business arising from previous minutes, let's move on to new business. The one item we have under new business is ATAC, the representative for ATAC. So I need to make a motion, Casey? I mean, about...
I'm not sure if maybe you should make it, but you could say your suggestion too, and that I'm not sure if everybody's aware that you did volunteer and attended ATAC last month, I guess, as our representative. So we hadn't had anyone come forward to be a representative. So Anna did go. So maybe administratively we'll pass a motion to nominate her as our rep, but she had another suggestion too.
So I'm thinking if we make the motion that the vice chair of the E&E is the, one of the duties of the vice chair is to attend as a representative of E&E, be the E&E representative to ATAC, then that we don't have to decide on me. It would go along with being a vice chair. And we would put that in the terms of reference for the committee. So if that's accepted, would that require a motion to change?
Great idea.
Yeah, we could make it all one motion. We could nominate you and then suggest that that be a position as the vice chair.
Okay, Bonnie?
Well, there's only one issue with that is somebody might be willing to be a vice chair and they step in for the chairperson, but they might not be able to attend the meeting. So it would put a restriction on who wants to be the vice chair. It would almost have to be somebody that's got time to attend the meeting then. Like rather, we might get new people on the committee at the end of this year, and maybe somebody is willing to be on there. Because we need 2 from our committee, right?
Well, I don't know if 2 is the mandated number, if that's a absolute thing or that's just being practiced.
It's in the terms of reference that we have 2, and it affects the attendance on the ATAC committee.
ATAC?
Like, has anybody else thought about it over the month that they would like to be on that committee?
I mean, I do recall in previous discussions that it's been difficult to find people to take this on. So I'm just trying to get a situation where it's not so difficult. Sammy?
If we did want to have a second member representative, we could consider the position being a rotating position, because I know that we're all very busy, so we might not be able to attend every meeting. So it could be a rotating position where some people attend sometimes and others other times.
Because I don't really know how ATAC works. I don't know what you think of that in terms of what you need, what is needed, and what's best for the committee from E&E. What do you feel about that, Jody? Oh, sorry, Bonnie.
Yeah, I would support that motion. It's a start. At least we know somebody. And yeah, Bonnie, that is a concern, but we can deal with that if it comes up. But I think to start, I would support that motion.
Yeah, I would say.
And maybe we need to look at our terms of reference. If we can't consistently not get 2 people on that committee, then maybe we need to look at the makeup and say we can only offer 1.
Casey?
I think that that's up for discussion probably on the next attack meeting, because that's their terms of reference. They're listed as having 2 E&E reps. So it will be their decision whether we have 1 or 2 reps or how that looks on their end. So
Maybe we could discuss that at the next ATAC meeting. Okay, I would like to move, if there's no more discussion. Oh, sorry, Bonnie.
I'd like to make a motion that Anna Stratton represents E&E on the ATAC committee.
I don't want to. No, I'm just kidding.
You what?
I'll second that.
Kidding. Okay, great. Thanks. Oh, second.
Jody?
Sure.
Jody, second. All those in favor? Oh, thanks, guys. Okay. Okay, and I would like to make a motion that the vice chair of the Energy and Environment Committee, part of the duties of the vice chair of the Energy and Environment Committee is to act as representative to the ATAC committee. And that, do I need to add in the part about rotation? And if a second member is, no, okay, I'm not doing that. Okay, that's the motion. Is that okay? Second? Emily? All those in favor? All those opposed? Great. Bonnie and Mike, I think. Mike Jorna. Sorry. Okay. Thank you. So we have anything else under new business, anyone? The one thing I did want to remind you all of is that Casey very kindly put together, and Tatiana reviewed it, all of the motions that we had outstanding. So Casey's idea was that on an ongoing basis, that will form part of our agenda. We'll just carry it forward so we can monitor progress on our motions going forward. So I hope you had a chance to see what we have on the plate now. I don't think there's not time to go through them today, but we can look at them next time around and see what see where we are. Anything else? In terms of upcoming, yes, Mike?
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, there's one more thing. Just upcoming events, Street Power event, April 9th and 10th. I just wondered, did we need volunteers for that?
We'll get back to you. We probably do, but we'll get back to you on that. Next meeting, I will know. Yeah, we can discuss that April 1st. We'll see how many we need.
I just wanted to let everybody know that Mark Carney is giving us talk at Rotman's on March 23rd, which I'm going to attend, but there's also a book. He's just published a book called Building a Better World for All. You know, he's the special UN envoy for finance and climate change. So hoping he has some wonderful ideas. Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mike? Second? Jeff? All of those in favor? Great. Thanks very much, everybody. See you next month.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Night.
Bye. Bye.